Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome to another new episode, new video of About Skateboarding. Now, if you're new here, my name is Sean, and I do daily videos, daily episodes about skateboarding in general and the whole world, the atmosphere, the whole entire stratosphere of skateboarding and all the fun stuff, and just give my thoughts and opinions on it and feelings and emotions and everything like that. Now, before I get into this video or this episode, I just want to remind everyone also that if you want to stream all the audio episodes in full, you can do all that over on Apple Podcasts and over on Spotify. Both, again, they're all in full over there, so go check them out as well. Now, also, if you do end up liking this video or any of these videos, and you want to get more of them or just do all of that, then to go ahead and give it a like and subscribe as well for more of that content, as it is, again, coming daily or more than daily at this point currently right now. So with all that being out of the way, all that fun stuff, today I wanted to kind of cover a somewhat of a trigger hot topic-ish, at least it was when I was a kid, and all that for the most part overall, which you could probably just tell from the title, which is, are skateboarding shoes, which means that our shoes that are made for skateboarding worth it? Are they overhyped? Are they really needed? Or all that kind of fun stuff. And I feel like there's a lot of different ways I'll back up. There's a lot of different ways I wanted to approach this topic, because it has really changed over the years that I've been skating, from when I was a kid to, definitely as an adult, and just overall just on how you view skateboarding. And the main reason why I say this is because I feel like I've seen, and I'll put it in the simplest terms right now, and I'll kind of dive deeper into it, obviously. But basically, I have seen people skating and known people that skate for a long time where they rip, shred, whatever word you want to use for it, in shoes that have nothing to do with skateboarding at all. Now, is that good for your body? Not necessarily. Is that good for the board or your feet? Not really. So that's kind of what I wanted to dive into somewhat over on this episode a little bit, because there's a reason why skateboarding shoes are made. There's a reason why there's professional models made by certain companies out there, and all the companies have changed infinitely over the last 25, 30 years since I've been skateboarding. So, to put it that way, all the brands, for the most part, that I grew up skateboarding or wearing don't exist anymore at all, except for a few here and there. But overall, they're all gone, because they were primarily, when I was a kid, they were primarily rider owned, skater owned, and operated. And this is that the way skateboarding has changed since, the early 2000s to now 2025, is that it just doesn't really work that way anymore. Overall, it's a lot more team-based, and there's not really, there's still pro model shoes, and I'll go through that in a few minutes here, as far as what there still exists and if it's worth it or not. But really, that's kind of how I feel about it, is that it's not as the same as it was back when, for example, when I read, or I should say when I had a subscription to Trans World Skateboarding magazine, or even for, Thrasher for a couple of years, all those overall, that back then the shoes would have, the magazine would have ads for the shoes in them, and it would be a lot easier for these companies to promote their shoes, and then you'd also see them in skateboarding videos that the companies made as well. And a lot of my favorite skateboarding videos of all time are made by shoe companies. I went through one of my other videos just a few days ago for I think it's East S shoes, for the Mindy Mati video. And Audio used to be a huge brand. Fallen was a huge brand back then. And just, again, there's a lot of brands back then. I know I'm missing a ton, but there's there were so many big skateboarding brands that were, again, owned and operated by these professional riders that were really famous for their own, or well known for what style of skiing that they did. And that's why they became really, really popular to have them. And nowadays, I feel like it's not the opposite, but it's more of a different kind of style, where currently, when the most recent skate shoe that I bought personally, and it's only because of the rider that created the shoes hadn't created shoes in them forever. And oh yeah, I forgot to name Emerica. I wore a ton of Emerica shoes back in the day as well, from Angel Reynolds, and that's who I was just reminded of, because Angel Reynolds just dropped a few months ago now with New Balance. I think it's part of their numeric series, I think is what it was called. But he re-engineered and redesigned one of their running shoes with all the things that he wants as an older skater now, and that's kind of what I want to get into now a little bit more. So, and to kind of give it another really big overview explanation. So, skateboarding shoes, to their core, what they're supposed to be for, and what they're made for, what they're intended for, is to support your feet. Really, overall, they're supposed to support your feet. And that can be for many different reasons. It can be from either whether you're olling or doing a trick off of like a 20 stair gap, or doing gaps in general over and over and over again. So the primary real reason for a professional skateboarding shoe to buy it or to own it is that your feet will be less impacted by the force of doing the same thing over and over and over again. Because if you wear normal shoes, like regular like tennis shoes, they're not going to have that for the most part. These days there's a lot more, I would say, feet health discussions out there that have led to more overall generally comfortable shoes. I'm not saying the same for skateboarding necessarily, but overall, like, there's a bunch of brands that I actually wear that are not skateboarding related at all, that are just more for support when I'm not skating. And like for me, for example, that's like the On Cloud shoes. Like, they have nothing to do with skateboarding, but when I am not skating, I wear them because they feel insanely good just when I'm not on a board, and I just want that support when I'm off the board. So again, that's what skateboarding shoes, because when you're a kid, you don't really care about that kind of stuff. When you're a kid in your teenage years or even early 20s, I feel like skateboarding shoes are much more for the function of what they're made for, which that goes into the whole process and reasoning of, giving your, like, the edges of the shoe better grip for the grip tip, or better flick, or better whatever. And then the whole reason for the skate shoes at the pro model level, at least for that part, is that the shoes are intended not to tear apart nearly as fast as a regular tennis shoe is. So if you ever looked at this is where I wish I had a really old Transworld skateboarding magazine, because a lot of the older shoe ads in Transworld would have almost like a graph, or a cool breakdown of how if a new shoe came out and they had an ad in the magazine, they would have all the different ways that they've improved the previous version. Because back then, especially, there was a lot of versions of the same shoe that the pros that were riding it would improve little bits and pieces of the shoe over the years that they wore it, to kind of better take care of their own feet, and then that would then turn into a thing that you can buy. So, but again, the primary reason for skateboarding shoes, besides the support of them, so you don't get your feet exhausted and broken after just going crazy doing gaps and whatever for a couple hours, is because it takes care of the shoe itself, and it doesn't destroy your feet as well. Because a lot of times, if you wear, because I know people who did the same thing, where they would wear just generic tennis shoes for skateboarding, it can still do tricks really well. It was not that. It was just the fact that they would tear their shoes apart probably twice as fast as they were supposed to be torn apart. And this is when it's more of when they wore Nike, which non-skateboarding shoes from Nike, because there is now, or there has been since the early 90s or late 90s, I think it was, for the Nike SB series, and that's now that's now Nigel Houston in his pro models, and it's funny about those two, because those ones I've seen them, I've never worn them, but the Nike SB for Nigel, they're very athletic looking. It's funny, to me they look nothing like the old school skate shoes that I used to wear. They're a lot more I guess the best way that I can put it is they're a lot more Nike and athlete sport oriented than any other older skate shoe. Because the big thing back in the day, I feel like, for skateboarding shoes was that there a lot of companies would put as much padding into the entire shoe as possible. And the best example of this I can give would be, if you remember the brand Osiris, I think it's how you pronounce it. I could be pronouncing it wrong, but Osiris, they have a shoe called the D3. And that shoe was crazy because, I owned it and I loved it because it was cool looking, but that shoe was crazy because it had an air pocket through the entire sole of the shoe for support. And then and it was also the thickest, most padded up sides. They were really, really heavy, so they weren't really that good to skate with, but your feet felt really good wearing them. So it was a very weird kind of balance of comfort, but also not functional for a skate shoe. And that's that's always been, in my opinion, the hardest balance of skateboarding shoes, at least the pro model versions of that, is to kind of balance about a functional skate shoe and then one that just is going to not get torn apart. And I remember those had issues too, because they had a thing where the air pocket in the entire sole of the shoe would get broken from people doing high ollies or doing just olling off of high stuff, or just doing tricks off of stuff, and they'd break the air pocket. And that was one of their downfalls, is that they would break the air pocket. So that was a fun thing too. But again, so the reason why it's a trigger thing for me, or how I feel about it now, is because, again, I've seen many skaters over the years that they do crazy good stuff, crazy good skating without wearing anything that's related to skateboarding for shoes. But again, their feet get hurt way quicker because there's not support in the right areas, and their feet and the shoes get torn apart way faster because again, it's not intended for skateboarding. And nowadays, I will say, and I'll even say this, like I remember like one of the original brands, which would be Vans in this case, because Vans has been doing it forever, overall for skateboarding at least. And one of their interesting things is that they have always made obviously lifestyle shoes that are more on the, like just the general, everyday wear kind of thing for lifestyle stuff. But their pro model shoes for Vans have been very not like, they're not bad, but whenever I wear them or have owned them, they're really kind of more, I almost want to say non-supportive, but like they don't have as much support as other higher end brands. And all I mean by when I say higher end is like brands that really were, I would say spent more time being designed by the pro rider, because Vans does have pro riders too. They do have, and they've had that forever since they've been a company at the beginning. But whenever I wear their pro shoes, they have a thing called the pop cush thing, which to me is not nearly enough support. It just really makes the shoe smaller overall, at least in my experience. And it's intended for the same things as the other brands made them for, as far as like having a support for your feet when you're jumping down a gap, whatever it might be, or just whatever, like, and all that. So, but whenever I've worn them or bought their pro model shoes from Vans, I just think it's weird because they never really supported my feet that well. But that's just me. So again, it's a tricky topic because shoes are a really weird thing when it comes to skateboarding, because you don't obviously have to have them or wear them to skate well. But going back to what I've said many times now already in this video is that, but again, if you don't, then you're going to get hurt quicker, or your feet will get a lot sore quicker. And I can definitely attest to this, because there was a point in time where I did not wear skateboarding shoes. I just wore some Nikes, just some general Nikes, like just lifestyle shoes. And I would skate and just do all these, and I could feel the board better, because they were just very basic shoes. Like it wasn't the Dunks or whatever, but it was just generic shoes, and I could feel the board better. But like after about like an hour of just doing like just flip tricks on flat land, my heel would get sore a little bit more, and then my feet would get a little bit sore. And that is the difference between buying a pro model shoe and not. Now, I'm not telling you in any way to go out and buy like a $120 pair of shoes, nothing like that, because these days in 2025, one of the best things about shoe, like I guess the designs of them and the pricing is that they're not as expensive as they need to be, or as they used to be, I should say, to get a good shoe. So you can still go and buy like just, like even a pair of Vans, like just, like between, $60 and $80 and have a decent pair of skating shoes overall. But again, but I feel like Vans has kind of like gone to a different arena in the past 10, 20 years, at least for me, they have, where they kind of have gone to where it's more about comfort and everyday lifestyle stuff. And I mean, they're still a skateboarding brand. They still have that DNA in them, but they're not like what they used to be, where they like were primary for skaters and that kind of thing. Although they still have they still have like a pro model rack in most stores of like pro model shoes, but not the same thing in my opinion. So again, back to my original thought here. So again, are skateboarding shoes of that pro model top end era kind of worth it? I think it depends on what level of skateboarding you're at. If you're a entry level skater learning the essentials, as I call them now, where you're just learning how to ollie and kick flip and heel flip, and you're not doing anything crazy, you're not going off of gaps necessarily, or big gaps really overall, then you can literally buy pretty much any pair of even Vans in this case of like a middle ground shoe and be fine. And then because most skateboarding shoes on the entry level basis have enough in them to support you in your skateboarding journey as a beginner. Now, once you start getting into things like doing like where you maybe will be skating for like full days on end, then you are going to start to tear shoes up a lot quicker. And the best example of this I can give is that there was a few skaters when I remember when the Andrew Reynolds numeric shoe came out from New Balance a few months ago now. A lot of skaters on YouTube they bought like 5 pairs of them, and they would literally just film themselves skating for an hour to test the durability. And overall, the shoes handled it very, very well for how I've seen other shoes like literally rip some toe pieces apart, or the side pieces from kick flipping or heel flipping, or the heels would be like worn down after like 3 or 4 hours. And that is not what you want in a skateboarding shoe. You don't want that, because again, the whole point of a skateboarding shoe is to be able to support your feet from all the drops, and to also give your feet or the shoe as much lasting value for what you're trying to do, because that will be the difference between, again, a non-skateboarding shoe and a skateboarding shoe, is that you will tear your feet up really quick. You'll get hurt more that way possibly, and hopefully not injured, but injuries do happen as well. But also just the everlasting value of just how long you can skate for in one session, because there's not much worse than having a really good session and then your shoe falls apart or it starts to hurt more, skate longer, I should say. And then if that happens, then all of a sudden you're kind of just not feeling as good physically overall too. And that is one of the biggest things I want to kind of throw in here about the whole Andrew Reynolds shoe again. And I only bring it up again because it is the most recent pro model that I know that's been released of that quality and that type of shoe, where he's been skating for 35, 40 years, I think, at this point. And he's had so many extremely popular shoes that he's released under his tenure as a skater. And how what's interesting to me most about his shoe, the new version, is how he made them for the older skaters of being, above 30 years old, basically, and how he needed more like a different set of just shoe specs for that shoe, because he's like, well, I'm still, jumping down these gaps and these stairs. I need to have more supports where the next day after I'm done with a huge session or filming, that my feet aren't dead, that my feet aren't exhausted, that my legs aren't exhausted. And he's like, I need to have a different set of shoe specs to handle that, rather than what I had when I was 21 years old or a teenager, where I could go all day and feel nothing. So that's the interesting thing about skateboarding, is that they provide that if you go for that model, or that, so to speak. So I feel like for an average skater, I feel like this is where it comes down to the whole thing of where, do I recommend buying the shoe of your favorite skateboarder and doing that? Possibly. I think that the shoe that you buy can be both a generic skate shoe and also be a pro model at the same time. And again, it all depends on your level. It depends on your financial situation as well, because a lot of skate shoes nowadays have gotten up to like $120, $130, $140 for just shoes, which is to me, it's insane. And some of them are brand-wise, we're also focusing on a lot more like weird stuff as far as like just branding and not really doing like skater support. Like there's a brand called Kiriyuma, which is like they have some pro models for like people like Gustavo Ribeiro and a few others as well in the team that do a lot of SLS contests, and I've had them as well. I've owned them before. They're very comfortable shoes, but they don't really last that long. So it's all that kind of balancing of what you want out of a shoe and who's riding for the company and what you're looking for support or tricks or whatever, that kind of thing. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Again, this is a very, very possibly ongoing conversation about skateboarding shoes and the history of them and what you want out of them and what you'll get out of them and the pricing and all that stuff. And again, no one's feet or how they're skating is really the same as anyone else's either. So it's always take all that into account as well, and do what's best for yourself as well. So I'll probably do another video about this later on down the road. I just wanted to bring up because it is still a very relevant and important topic inside the skateboarding world. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and then subscribe for more as well. And again, as always, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys all in the next episode and next video.